Hello guys, what's up? So good day. So this is me, Kurtzus, and for today's video lecture, we will be discussing all about variables and research paradigm. So in our succeeding, or rather in our previous discussion, I have discussed all about the theoretical and conceptual framework, wherein especially those two frameworks will now reflect later on the instrument that we'll be using when we going now to extract or gather our data. Now, under conceptual framework, your conceptual framework will now be later, or rather, it will now reflect yung variables na gagamitin natin sa ating study. So for today, I'll be defining what are variables, the different levels and the different types of variables. Then we'll be looking into one part of your chapter 1, which is your introduction, which is now your research paradigm. So let's get it started. So first, we have to define variable. So basically, yung variable are the concepts later na i-discuss natin, no? So variables are characteristic that has two or more mutual, quote-unquote, exclusive values or properties. Now, please take note pag exclusive values, ang ibig sabihin yan is may number yan. So for instance, yung height natin is 5'11", kunyari yung height ko is 5'11". So basically yung 5'11" na yan is basically that exclusive value. So exclusive yung value na yan. Basically, ano bang appropriate term pag exclusive? Exact. Yan, if that is the appropriate term. Exact, tapos may value yan. It's basically numerical or properties. But aside from properties, kunyari, to give an example, gender is considered to be a variable. Exclusive yan. There are only two types of gender, male and female, di ba? Age is considered to be variable kasi may exclusive value yan. Leadership style, di ba? May classification. Even the groupings are considered to be variables. So leadership style, democratic, authoritarian, etc. Or for instance, school is considered to be variable. SLU, UBUC considered to be variables yan. Now, variables are among the fundamental concepts of research alongside with measurement, variability, reliability, cause and effect, and theory. So this is now the important elements when it comes to research. What we are understanding basically in research would now be variables. So Bernard defines a variable as something that can take more than one value, and values can be words or numbers. So pwede siyang words, pwede din siyang numbers. So tanda natin, concepts and variables, they are actually the same, but variables are more likely operational, no? So to give an example, no. So this is your hierarchy of variables. So we could now classify your variables as a qualitative variable and your quantitative variable. Now, pwede dito, actually, before going dito sa nominal, ordinal, interval ratio na yan, pwedeng dito na agad lalabas yung discrete or categorical. Now, in your quantitative, discrete, then continuous. Then papasok yung nominal, ordinal, then your interval ratio. Now, first things first, we have now to classify what is a discrete variable or a categorical variable. I have forgot to include it. And what is a continuous variable. Now, ganito yan, no? So, types of variable. Categorical variable, yung sinabi natin discrete kanina, cases are in defined classes. So, defined classes, when we talk about defined classes, exact na siya. Exact na siya. So, limited lang siya, or rather, exclusive lang siya. Kunyari, when we talk about gender, exclusive lang siya in a small portion, no? So, male, female, we also include the LGBT, etc. So, ano siya, yung konteksto ng categorical, equal lahat. Madaming categories, from the term categories, pero equal lahat. Hindi katulad dito sa continuous later na may range yung values, na may ranking yung values natin. So yan, no? So kunyari gender variables, categories would be male and female. So we now provided two genders pero equal lahat yan. Or another instance would now be schools. Schools, ang daming schools, you could enumerate, and this could be considered as a categorical variable. But please take note, in defined classes, in defined basically equal lahat. What else? Later, I'll be discussing that one. Okay, continuous variables, metric data, quantitative. So cases are measured, thus this data yield metric or scale values. Now, please take note of the term metric or scale. So, nag-i-exceed siya. Tapos, nandun yung higher values than lower values. Correction sa categorical, may instances na may unequal, no? Makikita natin mamaya sa ordinal. Now, going back sa continuous, no? Height is considered to be metric data, continuous siya kasi nagva-vary. Yung height natin could start around 1 feet, di ba? Up to pataas, di ba? Your IQ din as well, kaya nakikita nyo scale, no? So, exceeding, walang definite portion. So, pwede siya mag-exceed. Walang limitation. Although may limitation naman, it depends on the scale that you'll be using. So, yun yung continuous, no? Now, pamagets natin, Itong categorical at itong continuous would now be defined specifically dito sa levels of measurement natin. So there are four. So tanda natin yung term na no-ear. Nominal, ordinal, interval, then ratio. At bakit natin kailangan nito? Kasi when we do statistics, we have to identify first yung level of measurements, kung anong type of variable yan. Kung nakita ko tong nominal, ito lang yung appropriate statistical measurements na gagamitin natin. Kunyari, pag ratio ng dalawa, correlation yung gagamitin natin. Pag dalawa is nominal, then we want to look its effect in a ratio variable, gagamitin natin is t-test. I'll be providing another video lecture about this one, no? So, dito muna tayo sa natures ng ating variables. Pag nominal yan, they are classified into categories. These categories have no particular order or value. So, for instance, gender. Yan. Gender will now be male and female. When you try to check, walang order, walang value. Hindi pwedeng mas mataas ang lalaki sa babae or babae mataas ng lalaki. Dumi ng utak ko. So basically ganun, no? Dudumi ng utak nyo. Okay. Next would now be ethnicity, di ba? A type of variable when you talk about ethnicity, Kangkanay, Ilocano, Igorot, etc. So, yun, no? So when you try to check, walang particular order yan or value. You could enumerate a lot. We could now classify them into categories. Political affiliation, di ba? Example of a political affiliation would now be the Liberal Party or the PDP Laban, di ba? Or your Communist Party of the Philippines. Bachelor's degree. I am a pol-sci student. I am a pol-sci major, psych major. Then region. Region is nominal kasi walang ranking yan. Kahit nakalagay dyan, region 1, 2, 3, 4, it's basically nominal. At hindi siya magiging ordinal kasi all regions are the same. Unless if you will now compare it in terms of area, etc. Yan na, dyan na magkakaalaman. So yan yung nominal. Now, the next one would be in terms of ordinal. Now, ordinal is may category pa rin yan. Medyo may limit. So, from highest to lowest, may limit yan. At may certain ranking yan. Now, in terms of the wideness of the yung pag-categorize natin ng ordinal, medyo maiksi siya compared with your interval kasi pwede dito 1 to 100. Dito more likely naglilimit siya sa 4, 5, 3, 7. It depends on how you categorize. Now, for instance, may I give you some example, educational level. So may ranking yan. Kindergarten, grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, up to grade 12. That is educational level. But ang kaibahan niya dito, sooner or later, nagsistop siya in a certain rank. So, categorize pa rin siya. So, group, the more appropriate term, pag ordinal, nominal, ganito. Both nominal and ordinal are group data. So, pwede mo siyang mag-group. The difference, nominal, wala kasing value. Ibig sabihin, lahat ay treated equally. Pag ordinal, basically, group siya, pero may ranking na siya. So, may value-based na siya. So, nava-value siya. So, grade 1 up to grade 12 is considered to be ordinal. Income bracket, kunyari sa tax, sa twin law natin, di ba? So, tax A, I hope ma-insert ko hopefully yung bracket system ng So yun nakikita natin, no. So nag-group siya, tapos basing it from the lowest income class up to the highest income class, 'di ba? Yan. Levels, ito makikita natin. When you use Likert scale, ang ginagamit natin would now be levels. Kunyari, we use a 4-point Likert scale dito. So, kunyari, participation. Do you participate? Always, often, seldom, never. So, nakita natin, we now group yung variables natin. And in the same time, may ranking system siya. So, the values vary. So, you could now put a numerical value. Always could be considered 4, 3, 2, 1, hanggang never. Yan. Or aside from yung mga highly agree, disagree, then highly disagree. Levels din yan, no? So, what else? Yan, madami actually. I let you identify sooner or later part yan ng yung activity or module activity. Then, under ordinal, meron din tayong dichotomous, no? So, just to insert this one, this is a semi-type of level of measurement represents only two categories. They could be nominal or ordinal. So, for instance, di ba, nominal would be in terms of sex, dichotomous yan, male and female. So, pagdating dito, it could be nominal, it could be ordinal, no? So, for instance, do you agree on same-sex marriage? Yes or no, di ba? Ordinal yan. Positive and negative, right or wrong. Disagree, then agree. It could be considered as dichotomous. Yan. Now, this is your categorical variables, grouping siya. Ngayon dito, hindi na ngayon siya nag-group. Basically, when we talk about interval and ratio, hindi na siya group. So, it could exceed. Wala nang limitation. And another thing is, ano siya, value system na siya. So, ungroup tapos valued na siya, no? So, yun, similar with ordinal, pero hindi na siya nag-group. The only difference will now come into the zero value. So, when we talk about interval, simply zero is arbitrary. So, pwede siya lumalagpas sa zero. So, for instance, your net worth, di ba? Kung madami kang utang, nagiging negative 70 yung pera mo, di ba? Or temperature, di ba? Either Celsius or Fahrenheit, nagne-negative yung temperature natin. So, that is considered to be interval. Unlike with ratio, ratio is basically the highest level of measurement, but it has a fixed 0 point. So, tandaan natin yung difference between interval and ratio. Ratio has a 0 point. Alangan naman yung age mo starts with 0, no? Or magne-negative 0. Actually, magne-negative 0. Benjamin Button, no? So, yun, no? Or even your height, negative 5'11", walang ganun, di ba? So, ganun yung ratio natin. Or another example would be your grades, di ba? Your grades would be ratio. Although nagne-negative pa yung grades nyo, hindi ko alam. Yan. So, yan yung ating nominal. Now, ano yung importance ulit or relevance of understanding yung mga levels of measurement? Bakit kailangan muna natin malaman yung nature ng variables? Kasi yung nature variables will later on determine kung anong statistical tool, yung mga formula na gagamitin natin when we now encounter these things, no? Or we want to understand a quantitative problem. So, kunyari, again, na-explain ko na to, but just to reiterate, kunyari, your surveys lang, so more likely yung survey natin could be done through mean median mode, kunyari, nominal, ordinal. But when you try to look into, if you want to associate one variable to another variable, you have to look into the natures of those variables. Kasi for instance, di ba, you want to compare kunyari gender in terms of reading comprehension or gender in terms of political participation. Anong tool yung gagamitin natin? So, I'll be presenting yung mga measurements and based from the variables in another video, no. Then another thing, no. Okay, I have to define first variables para magets natin itong research paradigm. So your research paradigm is a diagrammatic presentation of the study that presents the theoretical and conceptual framework. It as well presents the variables that we will be using. In the first place, the variables cannot be identified without now capitalizing on their theoretical framework and understanding your conceptual framework. You have to identify the concepts to be measured. So there are two types, your IPO model, then your IVDV model. IPO stands for input process output model, then your second model will now be your independent variable dependent variable model. Now ganito lang yan, no? First, your IPO model, input process output. So ginagamit siya more likely in surveys, no, or in a combination of several studies. So this model is largely used when the research attempts to isolate the factors or major variables that causes the problem subject's phenomena under investigation. So use a variety of variables at madaming nature yung variables. So hindi ka lang gagamit ng isang treatment, no, so ng isang tool. So kunyari descriptive, correlational, and causal comparative, kunyari yung gagamitin mong approach. So basically, a lot of statisticians or your research advisors will now suggest IPO na lang gamitin mo. But however, no, IPO and IVDV, you must sundan nyo na lang as undergrad students, no. One tip, no. Sundan nyo na lang yung kung ano yung i-provide ng iyong advisor, no, ng panel din, no. So input, no, kunyari ginamit si input output, paano i-construct tong input process output model, no. So pag input, it includes the data and variables of the study. So ilalagay mo lahat ng variables. I'll provide an example later. Pag process, anong proseso yung gagamitin mo? Simply, this is now the research methodology. So gagamit ka ba ng correlation? Gagamit ka ba ng correlation, ng descriptive survey? Gagamit ka ba ng causal comparative? And the tools to be used. Anong tools gagamitin mo? So kung madaming tools, so basically IPO model yung gagamitin mo. So gagamit ka ng t-test, mean median mode, then t-test, then correlation, yan, dyan mo ilalagay. Output, yung presents the desired results of the study. So simply you want to determine the effects of police brutality, of the notion of police brutality towards criminology students. So yan, ilalagay mo. So determine. Then expected outcome, basically, paano may apply yung study. So sa significance and implementation. Now, we could understand it further by looking into an example, no? So for instance, looking dito sa objective ng study, we could now check it on the output. So you want to know the political ideology of your local executive and legislators, then their attitude, kung agree nga ba sila or hindi, kunyari sa socialist-oriented policies. Then you want to check on the length of service. So kunyari, this is, hindi ko alam anong paper to, ba't ko sinama, no? But basically, you want to check that the longer the service in the government, more likely towards nga ba siya sa socialist oriented policy. So it's a combination of a lot of process, no? So ito yung mga variables natin, yung process that would now attempt to answer your variables would now be descriptive, correlation, and comparison. So nandito yung objectives natin. So actually dito natin makikita. Identification of first, the political ideology of local executives and legislators. Then yung extent of political attitudes nila. Okay, nagets ko na. Difference of the extent of local executives and legislator towards socialist-oriented policies. So nagko-compare ka dito. Then you now think that there's a relationship between the political ideology of each executives and legislator towards socialist-oriented policy. So yan, no. So nandito yung, basically this is reflected on your SOP, yung statement of your problem na to. So looking dito sa construction, basically may 4 na SOP. So from your 4 na SOP, ito yung magiging process. So descriptive correlation, so nakikita ko dito, this is, although I provide another video lecture about this one. So this is basically frequency, simple enumeration. This could be under mean median mode. This could be either t-test, ANOVA, we are not sure. Depende dun sa pag-construct ng variables. And this is correlational, no? Then look into the expected outcome. Plans to develop ideology, awareness, and electoral politics to the people. Hindi ko alam paano na. So basically, ganun, no? Yung plano mo, no? So next, we have your IVDV model. This is the most common model that is being used, no? So more likely, you want to know if there's a cause between two variables, your independent and your dependent variable, is you will now use your independent and dependent model. Now, tanda natin, kabisado na natin yan. Independent variable, presume effect, or rather, sorry, independent variable, presume cause, then your dependent variable is your presume effect. So there is a cause and effect. The questions raised as higher order and classified as situation relating. Now, ganito, for instance, no? Yan, you think now that your party affiliation, kung ano yung partido mo, yan, your political beliefs and virtues, will now affect yung attitude mo towards socialist-oriented public policy. May moderating variables tayo. Basically, moderating variables is either a presumed effect and a presumed cause, no? Or to give an example, yung mas madali na lang, no? Kunyari would know be your political belief. Kung political belief mo, no? Kung medyo left-wing ka ba or right-wing. Kung makakanan ka, progressive ka ba or conservative. Then yung dependent variable natin will be in terms of your extent of attitude towards activists. So I hope makakamaano ko siya. So IV natin yung political belief mo, then yung attitude mo towards activists. Now, anong hypothesis natin dito? Kung medyo progressive ka, medyo light yung medyo pro-activist ka. Pero kung medyo conservative ka, anti-activist ka. Yan, so yan, no? So just wrap up, pop up, lang, no? So yan yung IVDV, no? So causality, yan. You could include moderate variables, kunyari yung school, di ba? So college. So saan ka naka-college? Because we have this hypothesis, kunyari, when you work in elite schools, more likely progressive yung thought mo, no? Unlike with schools na wala namang kwenta, is basically they are more apathetic and conservative inclined. So ganun, no? To give you another example sa independent variable at dependent variable natin. Kunyari, ito last, no? Okay, another thing would now be income. The income. So yung income pwede siyang categorical. Paano siya naging categorical? Kunyari, we now use yung tax bracket ng BIR, no? So kunyari, class A, class B, class C, class D, at class E. So yun yung income tax, no? Yan. So yung income mo is your independent variable. Does your income affect now your political belief? Yan. So, kunyari, kung mababa income mo, more likely yung political belief mo is sort of like you're an anti-government. Kunyari, yan yung hypothesis mo. Then, kunyari, kung mas mataas yung income mo, more likely pro-government ka. So, yan. It could be a hypothesis, no? So, that could be under your dependent variable. So, thank you, guys. Dawag dito. Basically, just to wrap up things, so yung variables natin. So yung variables natin could be classified into two, categorical, then continuous. Pag categorical, tandaan natin guys na categorical group data yan. So, and it could be classified into nominal, then ordinal. Yung problema lang sa ordinal or the difference between ordinal is basically may ranking yan. Then we talk about continuous. Continuous is basically it's ungroup. So continuous siya. From the term continuous at may ranking yan. The only difference will now be coming in the zero value. So pag interval, zero is arbitrary. Pwedeng mag-negative. Pag ratio, basically zero is a fixed point value. You could not exceed from zero. So thank you guys. What's up?